I won't lie, this wasn't the game I wanted to review at first. In fact, I had something different planned altogether. Initially, I was going to review Diablo 2 and Lord of Destruction in honor of the recently announced remaster. I mean, I grew up with that game and it seemed right. However, for reasons wholly unknown to me, my laptop just refuses to record it, so I decided to try and record either Neo 2 or Dark Souls 3. The former I just bought, and the latter I've owned for a bit of time. Immediately after beating the Crystal Sage in Dark Souls 3, my controller just stopped working. Annoyed, I decided to try and get footage of Cyberpunk 2077. It, too, wouldn't record. So, in the end, I decided to stick with what I teased at the end of my Ultra Kill review. The universe has decided that I said I would review Terraria, so here I am. Terraria is a game developed and published by a 12-member team, Relogic. Don't let the often found nickname of 2D Minecraft fool you. Apart from some obvious mining-related similarities between this and Mojang's title, Terraria is more than able to stand on its own with a slew of bosses, unique biomes, situationally specific music, actual NPCs, and community-driven content that isn't heavily based around digital currency. Terraria has two main aspects to the actual gameplay. The first is combat, largely the primary gameplay loop, doing battle with the enemies and bosses the game throws at you using the materials provided. Copper is used to mine iron, and each ore that is progressively more difficult to obtain also yields better equipment when crafted into gear. This tiered progression also ties into defeating bosses, and without doing so, you can't unlock new materials and, as a direct result, crafted items. The second is creativity, creating whatever you want using those same materials. Most mechanics directly affect either side. You can also craft that same copper and iron into things like trash cans, copper plating, iron bricks, or iron doors. You can even craft some things you might not at all expect to be able to craft. Sure, you can cut down a cactus and then place it back into the world, but that's obvious. What's less obvious is that you're also able to craft that same cactus into a bathtub. You can go a step further and make an entire house made of cactus, fully furnished with cactus, or make a house entirely out of flesh with, you guessed it, flesh furniture. When it comes to crafting, each world can have unique materials based on a few factors. The initial defining trait is whether or not the world houses the purple corruption or its red counterpart, crimson. Corruption is, generally speaking, easier than crimson, and I do recommend it if you're new to the game. You should be careful, however. The corruption biome has chasms with large drops. Being unprepared for it could mean a big fall that ends in death. If you're working with corruption, then chances are you'll have access to the ores tin, lead, tungsten, platinum, and demonite. Crimson is a harder biome, although technically you'll have an easier time entering underground. The cave to enter tends to slope downward until you eventually enter a large opening. If you're working with Crimson, the chances are you'll also have ores copper, iron, silver, gold, and crimtane. Both Corruption and Crimson worlds have more ores that unlock as you progress that are specific to their worlds. These biomes aren't alone in having specific materials and items unique to them. It's obvious that you can find sand in the desert, but you can also come across hard fossils. You can find lava in the underworld, yeah, but there's also shadow chests, which contain items that are, you guessed it, unique to those specific chests. Every biome also has their own bosses and enemies. The queen bee is a boss only found in the jungle, and soul eaters belong in the corruption. This uniqueness is then tripled thanks to the fact that each biome and boss also has their own music. This game also boasts random and seasonal events that contain their own music, enemies, loot, and mini-bosses. These events, depending on the kind, can be summoned at will. You could also just wait for them to randomly spawn, or play the game at a specific time of year. Alright, so before going into the spoilers that I want to talk about, here are a few relatively quickfire things that are fairly self-explanatory or just don't need to be explained further. This game has mini-golf. I'm not kidding. Mini-golf. There's even an NPC that specifically sells items for it. There's something of a class system, but there's no leveling mechanic in the game. This is because your class is determined by your gear. You want to shoot, summon, stab, sling, sparkle. There's a class for it. Just put on the right pants and you're good to go. When you're in the underworld, be careful. If you see a flying enemy that's carrying what looks like a doll, either avoid them entirely or kill them when they aren't above lava. If you kill them above lava, a few things will happen, one after the other. Be prepared for a fight. Also, don't enter the dungeon without lifting the curse. If you ignore me and go into the dungeon anyway, try to stay above a specific depth. Going below only results in death. This game has a 10-second timer before you can respawn each time you die. I just want to complain about that, it's kind of annoying. Apart from your base equipment, you also have cosmetic-only vanity slots. These slots only affect your appearance, that's what it means by cosmetic, and can be further customized using dyes. There are even items that are purely cosmetic, like the Fez, that offer no benefit other than reminding me that I like Matt Smith, but I like David Tennant more. If you're new to the game, I'd recommend a classic character, small world with corruption, just to get the hang of things. Now, if you want to avoid spoilers, head here. Earlier, I mentioned that there's an enemy in the underworld that you should be mindful of. The item that they can occasionally be seen carrying is called the Guide Voodoo Doll. If that enemy dies above lava, or, well, if it dies in general, it drops the doll. And the doll, if it lands in lava, will get incinerated. Because it's a voodoo doll, the guide, the NPC that greets you when you start a new world, will die. This death initiates the first major progression required boss fight in the game, the Wall of Flesh. I need to specify that it is the first major one because the bosses up to this point haven't been difficult to the same degree as the wall is. I mean, your arena to combat the wall is literally filled with ash and lava, and if you're unprepared, it will cost you. Upon defeating the Wall of Flesh, he drops this, a tool that can be used to destroy crimson or corrupt altars. Destroying 3 altars causes 3 new, stronger ores to spawn in the world. Destroying any more than 3 doesn't really add anything else, so just 3 is fine. But that's not all. Killing the Wall of Flesh also permanently enables hard mode for that world, which is considered a separate difficulty distinct from what you chose when you created it. New materials, new enemies, new loot, new ores, and a new biome called Hollow. The game literally forces you to kill the guide, your first NPC, and the character meant to help you figure out what you should do next, and throws the world into hard mode once you've proven you're up to the challenge. Progression locked behind new challenges. As time goes on, you get better, and the world in which you play gets more dangerous and even physically changes to match that fact. More than just new enemies and items, hard mode also denotes that corruption and hollow, or crimson and hollow, depending on the world, now spread. You can cut the spread off by literally digging around where the corruption, crimson, or hollow is. You can also remove the spread using purification powder or the glantanimator with green solution. Admittedly, needing to kill a boss to access other bosses isn't in itself a new concept. That's how video games tend to go, after all. But only rarely have I seen killing the boss actually affect so much beyond just allowing you to move forward. Oftentimes a boss is just a roadblock you have to kill in order to enter a new area, a physical restriction on you progressing through the game. It's nice to see that Terraria doesn't fall into the same trap. To be fair, though that does happen. In order to access the dungeon, you need to kill Skeletron, otherwise you deal with the Dungeon Guardian. To get to the temple, you need to kill Plantaria, which itself isn't able to show up until after the 3 mechanical bosses have been killed. One could argue that this, like the Wall of Flesh, could be considered a test of skill, but regardless, it's a factor that some bosses do require other bosses to die first. Speaking of things dying first, I know an excellent segue. Relogic had announced Otherworld back in 2015, which was meant to be a full expansion to Terraria. Unfortunately, 3 years later it was cancelled, leaving behind the $5 legacy of its soundtrack. Some more good did come from its corpse, however, outside of its music. Journey's End. The last major content update that Relogic planned to release was announced in 2019 and released in May of the following year. A bright spot in an otherwise hellish time. Coming at the crisp cost of absolutely free. Journey's End introduced Journey Mode, a kind of creative mode. While playing a Journey character, which is only able to be used on a Journey world, you can spawn an infinite number of whatever items you've researched. This research mechanic is the key difference between Journey Mode and the creative mode of other games, a catch to Journey Mode. In order to spawn a theoretically infinite supply of an item, in reality you can only spawn the maximum size stack of that item as long as you have the space for it in your inventory, you need to research it, which destroys the item in the process. This means that the creative aspect of Journey Mode requires some amount of effort to attain in the first place. a creative effort, if you will, which I happen to enjoy immensely to the point where all gameplay footage captured was taken from Journey Mode. With the release of Journey's End also came the support of Tmod Loader on Steam. Unfortunately, it hasn't been updated for Journey's End just yet, and it doesn't have Steam Workshop support either as of the time of this recording. But the fact that players can have near instant access to such a large modding community is simply outstanding. All in all, Terraria is a fantastic game that you can truly get lost in and enjoy every single second of it. It's more than worth its $10 asking price. Now that that's through, I'm not sure what I want to do next in terms of review, because, well, the things I wanted to review just won't let me for fuck all reason. I mean, if I got another controller, I could probably go back into Dark Souls 3 or something, but that's going to take a bit of time, and I'm not a patient person. Damn. I don't know.